All right, let's start off by saying Barak Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is The Importance of Looking Up Words. And this pretty much came through a little bit of reading and some research I was doing a little earlier. I was watching a video Elder Pastor did. I think I was watching it either yesterday or the day before. And he was speaking about the Numbers, the 25th chapter. He spoke about, Baal-Peor. I forget exactly what he said, but it, set a thought in motion and, to go over this chapter. I was reading some other stuff before it, and then that chapter came into mind, so I wanted to go over it, and just to go, do a refreshing on it, because sometimes you know certain scriptures, certain things, but sometimes you gotta go over it because you may forget certain little details. It's all a part of staying sharp, like the scriptures say. And we want to read this story, right? It's short. We're going to get through as much of it as possible, but this is very important because this opens up, the more of an understanding on scriptures where it speaks about not to prostitute or make whores of the daughter of Zion, and Sodomites are the sons of Israel. Because a lot of times you have individuals out there, Israelites, that should know better because they were taught the right way, but they'll go to certain precepts in the law without understanding and say that, that's talking about, you just can't make a Israelite woman out there a whore, by all these different men sleeping with her, whatever the case may be. Which that's true. You're not supposed to do that, period. But when you go into the law, these particular laws that were written in there do not pertain to that. It pertains to something different. So when we go to Numbers 25 and 1, it says, "And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab." Now the first thing I did was I looked up that word whoredom. And that goes into a whole lot. The word whoredom is from the Hebrew word zanah. Zanah. The Hebrew word zanah means to commit fornication, which fornication is adultery, whether it's spiritual adultery or physical adultery. It says be a harlot, play the harlot. It says to be a harlot, act as a harlot, commit fornication. To commit adultery, which is all the same thing, right? Then it says here to be a cult prostitute. And that's the whole understanding of Numbers 25 and those other precepts, in the law that go hand in hand with this. To be a cult prostitute. Then it says to be unfaithful to the Most High, which that is fornication or spiritual adultery. Right, but the main thing we're dealing with here is to be a cult prostitute. Now, what is a cult prostitute? Well, let's look that up, see what it says. Let's type in to see what a cult prostitute is. Let's see. What is a cult prostitute? See, and the word cult is not a bad word. The word cult just simply means worship. So a cult prostitute would be somebody that prostitutes themselves in these different worships to these different deities. It says here, let me get this right. It says, what is a sacred prostitute? Sacred prostitution, also known as temple or cult prostitution, involved various activities in ancient times, many of which that occurred in Greece were in some way related to the Greek goddess Aphrodite and the Greek city of Corinth. Does Corinth ring a bell? Because there was a lot of wickedness that was going on in Corinth, and a lot of these Israelites that were living in there were doing these things. That's why the Apostle Paul said, and for so was some of you. For such was some of you. But you are cleansed now. All right? Let's see. Let's see what else we got. Then here in the Wikipedia it says sacred prostitution. Sacred prostitution, temple prostitution, cult prostitution, and religious prostitution are purported rites consisting of paid intercourse performed in the paid intercourse performed in the context of religious worship, possibly as a form of fertility rite or divine marriage. Gyros, gamos, which gamos is where you get marriage, like polygamy, monogamy. Gamos is like marriage. Right, it's marriage. All right. It says scholars prefer the term sacred sex or sacred sexual rites in cases where payment for services is not involved, right? Because you're doing it as a sacrifice to a particular deity, as in the case of what we're dealing with here in the book of Numbers, the 25th chapter. All right, where we looked up the word whoredom from the Hebrew word zanah, which means to be a cult prostitute in that particular scripture. Now when we go back, right, before we read on in Numbers 25, let's go real quick to the book of Leviticus 19 and 29. It says, do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore, lest the land fall to whoredom and the land become full of wickedness. And that's why the Lord said, don't learn the way of the heathen. Now we look up that word for whore is the word zana, same word that we looked up. Let's see. And now the word prostitute goes to the Hebrew word halal. It says to profane, defile, pollute, desecrate, begin. To profane oneself, defile oneself, pollute oneself. Ritually, which is what? In worship to these different deities. Sexually, in, the rights of these deities. To be polluted, be defiled. So that's what it's talking about. Now, the Israelite woman is not supposed to be dealing with multiple men unless the woman was married to a man and that man died and she became free from the law of her husband, and if she wanted to, she could get married because, as a young woman, she still has those feelings. Feelings, nothing more than feelings. So pretty much, that's only way she would be able to marry another man. Otherwise, if the man that she's with is still alive, that is adultery. If she goes and lays down with another man. This is why Yahweh Shai said, if a man put away his wife, saving for the case of fornication, which is adultery, he causes her to commit adultery. You see? Why? Because when she goes and gets married to another man, that man and that woman have just committed adultery against her first husband. You see? So that's why it's important to look up these words. Now, we're going to back that up with the book of Deuteronomy 23 and 17. This is the famous scripture that a lot of these Israelite camps out here try to go to or quote, when they're saying that, you can't make a whore of the daughters of Israel, and they think that it means, like these sluts that are out here laying down with Tom, Dick, and Harry and Harriet. That's not what this is talking about. Although that's not allowed either. That would fall under adultery. All right? It says Deuteronomy 23:17. There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. Now, when we look up both of these words, we're going to jump down to the word sodomite first, because the word sodomite is the word Kodash. Now, Kodash means holy, like Lashawan Kodash, which is the tongue holy or the holy tongue. Kodash means holy, but in this case, it says male temple prostitute. A sacred person, an example, technically a male devotee by prostitution to licentious idolatry. All right, sodomite, unclean. So when you deal with these different deities like that, there are different sexual, rights that go along with it. Some cases is man on woman. Some cases is woman on woman. Some cases is man on man. Some cases is man on beast, woman on beast. And then you have also the orgies that go along with it. These all are satanic because they have their origins going all the way back to the beginning of time when these different nations started worshiping their gods and brought forth these different rites. All right, now let's go back and let's get the word for whore in this particular verse. And the word for whore is Quadashah, which is Kodash in the feminine sense, with the ha at the end. So sometimes you see a ha at the end of a word, it represents female, but not in all cases, because you have a lot of different masculine names that have the ha at the end, which goes into the shortened form of the Most High's name in certain cases. So the word Quadashah is female temple prostitute, harlot. A female devotee, an example, prostitute, harlot, whore. So she was a female temple prostitute. And I bet you if you ask these individuals out there, these other Israelite groups, when they try to use the scripture to justify, you're not supposed to make a whore the daughter of Zion, they would not be able to explain that to you because the majority of them do not look up words. And this is the importance of looking up words. Now, I got a couple of things here that I wanted to touch on. The first one being Baal-Peor, because when we reading in Numbers 25, right? I'm going to read Numbers 25, 1 to 3 again. And then we're going to go and look up Baal-Peor. Numbers 25 and 1. And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. That was a ritualistic, so-called sacred rite, way that the nations worship their God. It says, and they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods. And the people did eat and bow down to their gods. So when they were doing these rituals, that was a form of submission to their particular false gods, false deities, because the gods of the nations are idols. And that was a form of bowing down, or becoming subservient to these different deities. It says, and Israel joined himself unto Baal-Peor, and the anger of the Lord Yahweh was kindled against Israel. So let's look up the word Baal-Peor in the Hebrew, right? Which is Baal Peor. And Baal simply means Lord or landlord. Peor is the mountain of Peor. Baal-Peor, Lord of the Gap. The deity worshipped at Peor with probable licentious rites. And it wasn't probable licentious rites. They were licentious rites. All right. It says Baal-Peor, a Moabitist deity, Baal-Peor. And let's see what it says down here. Master, possessor, owner. In the Phoenician dialect, let's see. The master of a family, right? Because the word Baal is Lord or husband or master. A husband, Lord of the city, Lord or possessor of a thing. Right, so that particular deity was the Lord of Peor, of that region. That's the one that was worshipped in that region. All right, and it goes on and on. That's the main point. So we're going to look up the word Baal-Peor in the Jewish Encyclopedia. It says, name of a Canaanitish god. Peor was a mountain in Moab. Numbers 23 and 28. 23 and 28. Whence the special locality Beth-Peor, which Beth-Peor is Bayath-Pa'awar, which is house of Peor. Right? It says Beth-Peor, Deuteronomy 3 and 29, etc., was designated. It gave its name to the Baal who was their worship, and to whose service Israel, before the entrance into Canaan, was, for a brief time, attracted. Numbers 3 to 5, Psalms 106 and 28. The god is himself also called Peor by abbreviation. Numbers 21:16, Joshua 22 and 17. It is commonly held that this form of Baal worship, especially called for sensual indulgence, right? And that's why the Lord said, learn not the way of the heathen. Why? Because the way of the heathen is off. That's off. Ak. Let's go real quick to James chapter 3. You know, this is why the scriptures speak about bridling your lusts, not going back to the former ways, you know, of things that you did when we followed after our lust. James 3:15. This wisdom descended not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. And that's why you had this devil, Aleister Crowley, which had a mantra or a saying, do as thou wilt. You know, and that's the whole law. That's their whole thing. Their whole thing is do whatever you want to do. Live out your pleasures, you know. Go on and do it till you're satisfied, whatever it is. I mean, inside joke, but it's true. This is the sentiment of the world. And even that devil Jay-Z, you know, Scaramanga, you know, he had a shirt on that said, do as thou wilt. Because he is a highly satanic devil. All right, just to put it to you blunt. So let's go back. So back to the information on the Jewish Encyclopedia. It says it is commonly held that this form of Baal worship, especially called for sensual indulgence, the context seems to favor his view, on account of the shameful licentiousness into which many of the Israelites were there enticed. But all Baal worship encouraged this sin, and Peor may not have been worse than many other shrines in this respect, though the evil there was certainly flagrant. In Hosea 9 and 10, Baal-Peor is the same as Beth-Peor, and is contracted from Beth-Baal-Peor. Alright, so you get an idea. That's just a little brief history on Baal-Peor and the things that were going on, you know, there. Now, let's go back and let's read on. Let's read on in Numbers 25 so you can get more into it. So Israel is going off, You know, the men were dealing with the women, and I'm sure vice versa. And pretty much this angered the Most High, you know, because they were bringing in these ritualistic, sexual, demonic rites, you know, as a sacrifice, you know, to these different gods, these different deities. In this case, we're dealing with Baal-Peor. So back in Numbers 25:4, and the Lord said unto Moses, take all the heads of the people and hang them up before the Lord against the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. Right, because a lot of times, when you had a lot of this stuff going on, it was mainly the heads. Some of the heads were the ones performing these things. When we read Ezekiel, the 8th chapter, it speaks about the ancient men that were worshiping the sun, that were going off. This is why it said that judgment must begin at the house of the Lord. And when you read Ezekiel, the 9th chapter, that was the Lord giving his angel charge to slay all of these different Israelites that were committing these acts, but to seal the ones that were not, that were the elect. And it said what? They began at the ancient. Because a lot of times it's the leaders of these different, you know, the leaders of these different, or the leaders pretty much, that were committing these acts, you know, that would also embolden others, but they would do it in secret. All right, so it says, and Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay ye every one his men that were joined unto Baal-Peor. Because when the Lord, you know, gave unto Moses the law, statutes, and commandments to give unto us, and we agreed and had that blood sacrifice, or the blood of the oxen, right, that joined us in matrimony to the Most High Yahweh. So when Jake committed these different acts, you know, in worshiping these deities, these false deities, they joined themselves in matrimony to these different deities. When we go to Romans 11th chapter, right? In the 5th verse, even so then at this present time also there is a remnant according to the election of grace, because if it had not been for the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai that was on our side, you know, then Jake would have been as Sodom and Gomorrah. In other words, they would have been destroyed. Not that everybody would have been a Mo or a Lesbo, you know. It says, and if by grace, I'm sorry, I think I might have skipped the main point. Yeah, verse 4. But what saith the answer of the Most High unto him? Meaning unto Elijah. I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. Meaning they didn't join themselves unto Baal. Just like, well, the elect, period, would never join themselves unto Baal or to any of these different deities or to any of their rites. All right? It says, even so then at this present time there is a remnant according to the election of grace, because it is an election of grace through the grace of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. The reason why, you know, there is an election today. You know, and Barakatah Yahweh Bashem Yahushai for that. So back in Numbers 25:6, and behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought unto his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses, and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Right, because the Most High had brought judgment upon Jake. So there was those that were repenting, but there was those that were still doing and committing those acts. Temple prostitution act. And when Phineas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. So now why did he thrust the man and then the woman through her stomach? Because he was committing the act of the sexual right to Baal-Peor. And when Phineas went into the tent where he was committing this act, he rammed the man through the back and he rammed the woman through the stomach. And they both died. And that pacified the anger of the Lord to where he stopped slaying Israel. Because he was getting busy on Jacob. And those that died in the plague were 20 and 4,000. So it was 24,000 Israelites that died there. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Phineas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consume not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Wherefore say, behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace, and he shall have it in his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his power and made an atonement for the children of Israel. Now the name of the Israelite that was slain, even that was slain with the Midianitish woman, was Zimri, the son of Salu, a prince of a chief house among the Simeonites. So there was a simple-minded Simeonite who was a top man among them that was committing these acts. And he should have known better. Because if he was a top man, that means he knew the law. So he knew the law about being a Sodomite or a temple prostitute, that it was not right to do. So that was a fitting death for him. And the name of the Midianitish woman that was slain was Cosby, no relation to Bill Cosby, the daughter of Zer. Inside joke. It says he was head over a people and the chief house in Midian. So even the daughter or the woman that was committing this act, this Midianitish daughter, her father was a chief, like one of the top men among his tribe. So you had a top woman among the heathens, and you had a top man among Israel committing this so-called sacred rite, temple prostitution to Baal-Peor. So you see why the Lord was pissed off, because the Lord said he's a jealous power. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, vex the Midianites and smite them, for they vex you with their wiles. Which is what? Those different, cult prostitutions and worships that they were into. It says, for they have beguiled you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosby, the daughter of the prince of Midian, the sister which was slain in the day of the plague for Peor's sake. Right. So 2 tears in a bucket. All right, now let's go to the Apocrypha real quick. And let's go to the book of 2nd Maccabees to show you more, of this cult or temple prostitution. And this is why it's important to look up words, because if you don't look up words, you're going to be lost, and you're going to be made to look stupid when you try to bring out certain things. You shall have no whores among the daughters of Israel. You have no idea what that means. Now, like I said, you're not supposed to, make whores of the Israelite woman, because that goes into whoremongering. Whoremongering is not a man that just lays down with all types of women. No, if the man lays down with 1,000 women and those 1,000 women are not married, guess what? He ain't doing nothing wrong. But if he lays down with women that are married, then he's an adulterer. But he's not a whoremonger. A whoremonger is a pimp, one who sells whores. Just like a fishmonger is someone that sells fish. A warmonger is someone that sells war. Learn your words, man. Learn your words. 2nd Maccabees, I don't know why I said Ezra 6:1. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens, this is dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes, to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers, and not to live after the laws of the Most High, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympus, which in this case, at this time, this is who was being worshipped. And that in garrison of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple, listen good, for the temple was filled with riot, That's one word to take out of it. And reveling, that's another word to take out of it, by the Gentiles, the heathen, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places. Why? Because that was the temple prostitution. And besides that, brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, pork, all kind of manner of abominations, which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew, because this is how a lot of Israelites became Greeks. That's why the Apostle Paul said there's no difference between a Jew and a Greek. Why? Because they're both Israelites. And in the day of the king's birth, every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of Bacchus was supposed to be the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. And the reason why they were carrying ivy, because the ivy leaf represents everlasting life, or eternity. All right, and I'm sure there's more to it, but that's part of the gist of it. And Bacchus, which is Dionysus, that was the god of wine of the Greeks and of the Romans. All right, so now let's look up the word Bacchus real quick. Roman festival of Bacchus. It says the Roman festival of Bacchus was usually referred to as the Bacchanalia. You brothers are familiar with, some of you brothers are familiar with those terms. Carnival, Bacchanalia was a series of feast days held in honor of Bacchus. This Roman god of wine, ecstasy, freedom, fruitfulness, and vegetation was always up for a party. His Greek equivalent was Dionysus, and preceded him by several hundred years. The priests of Bacchus were women, men being forbidden from the priesthood by an old decree called the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus. So you see feminism even back then. The god was thought to possess his followers during the ritual and free them of the inhibitions of the shackles of social rules and norms. It involved dancing, music, and free sexual activity. That free love. Now notice it said that the god was thought to possess the followers. Yeah, it didn't. That's why when you commit certain acts, you become possessed by the demons. And a witch, their greatest desire is to be possessed by demons, so they can do the will of their master, Satan. The Bacchanalia was very popular, and there is evidence that they were well-organized events that took place throughout Italy. People saw the festival as an opportunity to throw off the shackles and inhibitions of everyday life in joyful and often inebriated celebrations. It's a celebration, bitches. The history of Festival of Bacchus. When the Romans conquered Greece, they brought many Greek customs and beliefs into Roman culture. The Dionysian mysteries were rituals that are believed to have used intoxicants and theogens are hallucinogens, dance and music to encourage attendees to shrug off social constraints and return to their natural primal state. Everyone could participate, even if they were slaves, outlaws, or non-citizens, and there was a mystical element to them, as its name suggests. It was a mystery religion reserved for initiates, but the festivals were open to the general public. The cult of Dionysus is ancient and believed to predate Greek civilization. It is thought that the intoxicants and the trance states during the rituals allowed the god to take possession of his followers and grant them ecstasy. And that's why when you listen to the John Todd Confessions, one of the main things he was saying in these incantations is what? They took many drugs. They were constantly intoxicated by drugs and alcohol, to bring on the possession of these demonic forces, you know, and that's what they used. And you know, it goes on and on and on. I mean, if you type in, because you know, if you type in Roman Festival of Bacchus, it should come up. You know, celebrate pagan holidays. You know, and the other one is the Jewish Encyclopedia. You just type in Baal-Peor, and that'll come up. All right. So now, I'm gonna leave you with one more precept, because we read in 2nd Maccabees, the 6th chapter, right? The 4th verse says, "For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles." So I want to accentuate those two words. So we go to Romans 13. Let's start at 10 or 11. "And that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light," right? Because that all causes darkness. And that's why Jake was in a very dark place during the Greek Empire, the Hellenization period, because they were following the customs of these heathen gods, and they became further and further put away by Yahweh, the Most High. You know, Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. So it says, "Let us walk honestly as in the day, not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying." So notice it says, "Let us walk honestly as in the day, not in rioting." Remember, we read over here in 2nd Maccabees 6 and 4, "For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles." So when we look up this word, the very first one being rioting, it goes into the Greek word komos, right? It says a revel, carousal. You know, they got your carnival, your bacchanalia, and whatever other, a Fat Tuesday, you know, and all that other stuff that they worship, where you have, you know, people that are always drunk, listening to music, you know, half naked, you know, having sex on the streets, you know, having orgies, because the orgies are a big part of all these different rituals. You know, Elder Apostle Gabar always goes into the high satanic days of Esau. You know, and all those high satanic days require some type of sexual performance. Whether it's lesbo, whether it's bestiality, you know, whether it's man on woman, whatever the case may be, whatever particular sexual event that particular day calls for. It all goes back to the ancient world. It says a nocturnal, which means at night, and riotous procession of half-drunken and frolicsome fellows who after supper parade through the streets with torches and music in honor of Bacchus, also Dionysus, or some other deity, and sing and play before houses of male and female friends, hence used generally of feasts and drinking parties that are protracted till late at night and indulge in revelry. You know, and when you go down to the scriptures where that word appears, in the case of Romans 13:13 is rioting. In the case of Galatians 5 and 21 and 1 Peter 4 and 3, the word they use is revelings. Remember we read riots and reveling. Galatians 5:21, envying, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of the Most High. 1 Peter 4 and 3, for the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. See, we read about the Gentiles and their rioting and reveling. When we walk in lasciviousness, lusts, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. So that word, you know, for riot or reveling is the same word. You know, and that's those parties, you know, the different clubs where you go to party and drink. A lot of adultery goes on in there, a lot of homos, you know, a lot of more activity goes on in there. So we looked up the word rioting. Now we're going to look up the word chambering. The word chambering is koite. Koite. And the word koite is a place for lying down, resting, sleeping in, a bed, couch, the marriage bed of adultery, cohabitation, whether lawful or unlawful, sexual intercourse. You know, there goes your orgies. You go to the club, you're drinking, music is playing. You know, and then in a lot of cases, when you go back to the Greek and Roman Empire and other empires, there would be a straight up orgy going on. You know, you see in the movie Eyes Wide Shut, when they went into that place, what did you have? You had, you know, a whole bunch of people watching, people having sex, you know, on the table, you know, and just all manner of wicked shit going on. They wear those capes or whatever that's called, you know, they have on, and most of the time they were butt naked underneath, you know, easy access. So that's all that goes on. So when you go back and you read about, you know, Baal-Peor and the rites that were going on there, that was cult or temple prostitution. And that's the reason why the man was killed. Not because he was dealing with a heathen woman. You know, these guys are they lack understanding, they lack vision because they don't look up words. They have no full understanding of what the scriptures are speaking about. You know, they just go off of English words, you know, that have their meanings changed when you go back into the Hebrew or the Greek. This is why it's important to look up these words so you can get a better understanding of what these laws and scriptures are speaking about. You know? So I just wanted to make a mention of that, you know, the importance of looking up words. So I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say Shalom.